results of Sunday. I am going to let him explain those things, but I'm going to just start off by just welcoming today, everybody, friends that are watching. Today is a special webcast with Miguel Pizarro. On Sunday, Venezuelans cast their votes in what was anticipated as a pivotal presidential election, I think symbolizing their hope for a return to democracy, prosperity, and stability, despite their bravery, I think, in staunch adherence to democratic values amid severe repression. I think the outcome announced by the Maduro-controlled National Electoral Council has cast a shadow over these elections. And yesterday, the council fraudulently declared Nicolas Maduro as the winner, and the declaration was made official in a meeting with the diplomatic community in Caracas. Exit polls and paper vote tallies suggested that the results that were provided do not accurately reflect the will of the Venezuelan people. And the government failed to provide a detailed polling data to substantiate these claims. So today we're going to dive in with Miguel on the implications of these developments and discuss the path forward. Miguel Pizarro has been a guest on our podcast, and he is just 36. He is an elected deputy to the National Assembly of Venezuela, representing Petare. Since 2023, Miguel has taken to the international stage, managing international relations for the legitimate National Assembly and handling some heavy responsibilities with the United Nations. He's also a key
It seems we lost Carl.
Oh, I thought it was me.
No.
Oh dear. Let's wait a couple minutes, and if not, we'll get right into it.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to start, Robert, while Carl comes back.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I just wanted to, the first question going into it basically is, what's the plan now? You know, given that what we know about the exit polls and the contrast between the exit polls and the actual result declared by Nicolas Maduro, I guess the question is, what is the plan to challenge and overturn the results? Oh, Carl's back, but we got into it, Carl. We're covering for you.
Good.
Those are the perks of real life.
Yeah, this is real life for sure. I don't know where we dropped off, and thank you so much, Robert. Where are we, Robert?
I just asked the first question. What's the plan now?
Great. Let's keep on going.
Yeah, sure. I will just jump into it, and thanks, Global Americans, Robert and Carl, for having me and for inviting me, and also for all the support you have given to Venezuelans and to the right, proper approach to the Venezuelan situation. First, a little bit of context and significance of what just happened. What we saw on Sunday in Venezuela was an historic day for multiple reasons. The first one, and I believe one of the most important, is that it's the biggest proof that we don't have two Venezuelas, that there's not one Venezuela outside of Venezuela and another one inside of a country, or that this is a matter of a country polarized and divided by half, and it's in the middle of a big fight between brothers or citizens. That is not the case. The big majority of Venezuela elected change, and the big majority of Venezuela went to the polling stations to vote for change. Second thing, in difference to other moments, we are not coming here from a weak position. We are not coming here to present ourselves as the victims of a fraud. This is a total different situation. We understand that we won, and we have all the paper trail, we have all the proof to show to the world and to show to everyone inside of the country that we won. But what I believe is the most important part of what happened on Sunday is that everyone who was involved with the process, everyone who volunteered, everyone who voted, everyone who mobilized around the centers knows what happened inside of Venezuela. Everyone knows that Edmundo González Urrutia, under Maria Corina Machado leadership, won the election, and that what the regime is trying to do is basically to create a false result and try to get away with it. So where we are right now, first, we are making a huge effort to make sure that everyone understands how the election unfolds. And for some people that maybe wasn't following the campaign and the election on a daily basis, this wasn't a normal campaign. This is not like the US campaign or the Switzerland campaign. We did an electoral campaign with more than 70 people arrested or disappeared. We did a campaign in which all the campaigning team, the head of the team of Maria Corina, it's under a refugee situation in the Argentinian embassy. We did a campaign in which our candidate was like this Harry Potter character, like Voldemort, like the one that should not be mentioned in all the national media and in the normal media outlets in Venezuela. Not one invitation, not coverage of or the campaign. Everything we had to do it through social media. But also was a campaign in which we weren't able to take a plane to stay in an hotel in the regions. It was a campaign under a dictatorship. And even in these conditions, at this point, at this hour, we have more than 70% of the paper trail already processed. And in the case of Venezuela, getting the acta, getting the final tally of the voting is not like in any other election. Our witnesses were under siege, under fire, under violence. A lot of them had to be hidden for the last 24 hours until they were able to deliver the acta and to scan the acta and give the results. But also, this is the first time that the Unitarian Platform and the opposition arrived to an election absolutely prepared to face the challenges from the regime. So we had 4 quick counts, all of them consistent with the numbers we had. We had exit polls, all of them consistent with the numbers we have. And we had all this big structure of comanditos and witnesses that it's now how we can prove this. So summarizing a little bit, Robert, and sorry for the context note, we are first making sure that everyone outside understands and have access to what we have. We released yesterday a website in which anyone can go and check the electoral results, can check all the paper trail and acta by acta. Second, we are increasing the internal pressure. What we are saying to everyone is we won, and any negotiation, any diplomatic effort, any political effort has to start from the point of respecting the people's will. And this is not the same context or the same situation in which we were 2 or 3 weeks ago. And as a matter of framing on this is not the opposition non-recognizing the electoral institutions or the opposition non-recognizing the regime. This is the regime non-recognizing the vote as an instrument of change, or the regime non-recognizing the people's will and denying the electoral path. So we are insisting. We are also pretty happy, and you can see, in difference to other moments, our movement have the morale high, and we have the morale high because we know we won. And we know that even if the regime tried to get away with this is the beginning of their end. This is not also the old school situation in Venezuela in which this was only on the east side of Caracas. The old school Chavismo base, the ones who in 98 and in early 2000s were the political support of the Chavismo movement, it's also part of our movement now. And what we are seeing is that people voted the same in the rich neighborhood than in the poorest of the poor neighborhood, and that is the national consensus: future reconciliation and change in peace. The ones who are trying to appeal to violence and the ones who wants to stay in power through violence are the regime and their cronies. I will stop here. Sorry, it was a little bit long.
No, this yes, and obviously, that was a huge and comprehensive response. Let me continue with these questions because I think a lot of folks we're seeing a lot of things in the media. There was the pronouncements yesterday. In the past, it has been reported that the opposition didn't always agree, and I want to ask you a couple of questions when it comes to how does the opposition intend to maintain unity and momentum in the face of this increasing sort of authoritarian resistance? We're watching protests right now. I'm assuming that is going to continue, that basically there's a paralysis in Caracas. What role do you think that the international community can play in supporting Venezuelan civil society and democratic institutions. So the first question is, how do you maintain your momentum? And second, how can the international allies support your work?
Yeah, about unity, I believe, Carl, that one of the biggest change that we have seen, and one of the most important elements that we have right now, is how unified the opposition is. No matter if it's like a super moderate kind of leadership, or it's the hardliners of the hardliners kind of leadership, everyone is together right now, and everyone is aligned behind Edmundo Maria Corina leadership. I believe that the reconfiguration of the position after the primaries has a lot to do with this. After October of last year, when people massively elected Maria Corina as the leader of our movement, as our presidential candidate, from that moment on, there's a reshuffle on the opposition. There's a reorganization in how we work and how we take decisions. I believe that also all this process, I've said this in the past as a joke, but now I say it as a lesson learned. What you cannot unify by political ways, the people and the movement help you to unify it by the strength of what is happening on the streets. And I believe that that historic sense of responsibility, that sense that what we have in front is bigger than anything that we have had in the past, that's also helped to trigger some more maturity in certain leaderships, and to understand that this is not the moment to infight. This is not the moment for calculation. This is the moment to everyone to help and to push in the same direction. And also that happens for a second reason. There's no political future for anyone in a country under a dictatorship. Even if you think that the presidency or the executive power is not your thing, and you want to aim, I don't know, to be governor, to be a mayor, to be part of the national parliament, there's no future for none of those institutions if Maduro prevails, and if this way of the regime is what starts happening or existing inside of the country. So it's in the best interest of everyone to push in the same direction and to make sure that the people is respected. Of course, the regime will try to divide us. And right now it's happening in the same way it happened during the whole campaign. We don't only defeated the regime in the electoral path, in the voting, we also defeated the regime in political terms, because this whole campaign was also trying to isolate Maria Corina, was trying to isolate Edmundo Gonzalez, was trying to sell the perception to the world that we were going to boycott the election, to abstain, that we were trying to instigate an uprising of the army or something like that. And we were step by step debunking everything they were saying about us, but also proving everyone wrong. I remember people saying to us 4 months ago, you are not going to arrive to the end of elections. You are never going to have the people in the poor neighborhoods facing the threats of the regime and going to the polling stations and voting against the regime. You are never going to be unified. And now we can say to everyone, we proved them wrong. And we are unified. We have a big popular support. And also we have a lot of presence and organization in places in which we never existed in the past. And second, about the international community, and I believe both things are related. First, there's a change in the Venezuelans. We learned that the international community is going to help us, is going to support us, but it's not going to save us. That we needed a movement inside of a country. And that is part of the biggest things that we achieved on Sunday. Now we have our own leverage. We have a social and political muscle inside of Venezuela that is make us an actor in self, and we are not only depending on what the international community can do or the tools that the international community, the pressure and diplomacy can give to us. Now we can have that as a tool, but we have a main ingredient that in the past was absent, that is the people of Venezuela, and the people of Venezuela supporting a coherent leadership. First thing the international community can do, not to normalize what is not normal, not to recognize what should not be recognized. And this position that right now is an international consensus among the international community, that is, the regime has to release the results to the station level, to the voting station level, table by table, mesa by mesa, because in the moment they publish those results, we're going to be able to prove what happened, and we're going to be able to show the contrast between the numbers that we have, that is a paper trail that the electoral machine gives to the witness in the moment you close the process, and what the regime is trying to announce. Second, this is a moment to do combination of engagement and pressure. There's countries and actors that has the role to pick the phone and call the regime and say to them, there's life after power. There's possibilities to build incentive and guarantees, but all of that starts from the point of recognizing that the time is over, of recognizing that the people will express themselves, and there's the desire for change inside of Venezuela. A third thing in the line, not of engagement and more in the line of pressure, the regime did a lot of this also thinking that the wars is already over, that no matter what they do, they're never going to be back in the isolation position in which they were years ago, and they're never going to be under the same amount of pressure they were years ago. And I believe it's really important to take away this perception from the regime and make sure that they know and they feel that there's consequence for their actions. And fourth, and the international community has an important role in helping the opposition, one, to remain safe. And this sounds weird. Everyone can ask, like, how the international community can help on this, but they can help. Right now, we need everyone also calling and sending messages that repression, massive detentions, enforced disappearances, torture are not going to be condoned, are not going to be ignored, and it will have consequences. And second, to help the opposition also to remain united. In the past, what has happened with certain actors in the international community is that in the middle of the biggest pressure for the opposition, they cherry pick. And right now is not a moment to cherry pick among opposition leadership, and it's a moment to help everyone to remain together and to remain moving in the same direction.
We talked a lot about the unity of the opposition, which is really important and something that was missing in the past. Ricardo Hausmann, I think I'm paraphrasing Ricardo Hausmann, that says that one of the things that's different this time is that whereas in the past the regime used institutions and molded the institutions to its own model and basically used the rules of its game the rules of the game to its advantage, now they've absolutely thrown out the rules of the game. So the institutional damage is much greater. What are your plans, or what do you think is the way to engage with, beyond the opposition, but for example, to engage with other institutional actors, with the armed forces, with other members of society that are going to be key to get this thing done? Is there any kind of contact? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, first, and I believe it's a crucial element of the election. The first witness, the first-hand witness, the first ones receiving the results, the first ones knowing what happened, is the armed forces. And it's the army and the Plan República. They were in the voting stations. They know what happened in each one of those voting centers. They know the mood of the people, how the people feel about the election. They were there since Friday in the installation of these polling stations, and they know that people that turn out massively to vote against the regime. And we are trying to appeal to that. At the end, there's a high-rank part of the army, high-rank part of the regime that is the one that is charged internationally for crimes against humanity, or is under international investigations for corruption, for drug trafficking, etc. But there's others on the regime that are not there. And part of our message is that there's life after power, that there is capacity to create guarantees and incentives to have a peaceful transition in Venezuela, and that right now, having the leadership that we have of Maria Corina and having an elected president and as Edmundo Gonzalez is the best moment to have or to do any kind of commitment in that direction. We are not naive. We understand that this is not a pendulum, that this is not only about winning an election and that Maduro was going to wake up on Monday and say, hey guys, you defeat me. This is a moment to step out of power and to start a normal transition. We know that that was not going to be the case. And that was the reason why we were prepared. That is the reason why we created the witnesses structure. That is the reason why we were briefing international community since day one in what we were seeing and why we were trying to go in the election. And that's why we explained to everyone that even when this wasn't fair or free, this was the best path to try to create a change in Venezuela. But now, a small comment about institutions. Another message that we have said, and Maria Corina herself has said, is that what is in game right now is executive branch, is a presidential office. But even if we gain the presidential office right now, the regime will remain in control of the justice system, of the National Assembly, of the army, of the controller's office, of the National Prosecution Office. So at the end, it's not like this means that we are ripping off the regime from the root. Even in the scenario in which they recognize that they lose the presidency, it means that we are going to have to go through some way of institutional coexistence while we are able to rebuild the institutional framework that the country needs and that the country desperately is claiming for. What the CNE did, Robert, is a political decision from a national institution. And when the CNE decided to announce a different number, and then when you see the defense minister doing the statement he did, and then you see the prosecutor doing what he did yesterday and what he's doing today, you see that the institutional framework of the regime is also being part of the problem. And that's why we are not seeing this as we going to the CNE and asking to the CNE to please recount the votes and do like a traditional impugnation of the elections, because we know that that is not the case. In the same way, we knew that to have electoral conditions, the conversation was with the regime, not with the CNE. In the same way, we know that to release political prisoners, the conversation is with the regime, not with the Supreme Court or the justice system. And all of that is because even when they behave as an institutional government, they are a dictatorship. And at the end, justice decision, electoral decision, institutional decisions, all of that comes from the political decisions and from the political command of the regime. So we are not trying to go, we understand the institutional part. We are doing it because it's part of the credibility and the moral and legal base that we need for any other claim. But we also know that it's not the CNE the one that is going to solve this. It's a combination of pressure, diplomacy, and trying to look for cracks on the regime that is going to lead us to a transition.
So Edmundo Gonzalez has talked a lot about the need for reconciliation. There are protests happening right now. And I don't think those protests are going to die down. How do you balance the need for peace with the urgency of addressing what many see as a stolen election? How do you see going forward in this situation?
Yeah, in the previous meeting, I had the same question in a different wording, but the same question, and I like the Maria Corina answer for that, and I will quote her to start with that. Is what's more peaceful than voting? What is more peaceful than trying to produce a change in a country under the dictatorship that going to the polling stations and voting? And at the end, the one who is opening the door for violence, the one who is trying to trigger violence and use violence to remain in power is the regime. We choose peace. We choose the electoral path. We choose to organize ourselves and go and vote and go and defend the people's will in the voting stations. We did that with more than 70 people being arrested during the campaign and being disappeared. We did that with all the campaigning team as a refugee in an embassy. We did that in the worst harassment that we have ever seen. People on Sunday was hiding in bathrooms in the polling stations with the actas in order to avoid those papers to be stolen. People was hiding in houses to be able to protect the paper trail of the election. And at the end, that speaks about a peaceful country. We don't have a guerrilla. We don't have a paramilitary army. We don't have a shock brigade. We have people organized to vote and people organized to express themselves. But also, there's something that everyone needs to understand. This is not a normal election. So this is not like people is going to demonstrate about one candidate or the other. This is not Kamala versus Trump. This is existential for us Venezuelans. So what you are seeing on the streets is the popular expression of discontent. No one in Venezuela is going to allow the regime to steal our happiness, to steal our joy, to steal our majority from us. And it's absolutely impossible to control some of those expressions. What we are trying to do, and has been the message yesterday and is the message today, is one, a lot of non-violent discipline. We don't have a problem against any other citizen, against any neighbor, against any other Venezuelan, because we are a big majority claiming for change. So not to fall into this incentivized violence by the regime, to avoid repression as much as we can. If you see, we are trying to avoid putting people in front of the authorities like in other moments, because we don't want to give them an excuse to repress massively. Third, we are calling today for town hall meetings. It's going to start, well, it's starting 7 minutes ago, but we are doing in all the country town hall meetings today to start trying to keep the momentum and to inform everyone about where we are. Today, also for us, is an important day inside of a country, because at this point, as to now, we already have more than 84% of the actas received, and we have more than 73% of those actas totalized, and we have the numbers. And right now, at this point, with all the paper trail we have, even if the regime says that in the rest of the paper trail, they won by 100% of the votes, they won all the voters, everyone voted, and it's 100% participation and 100% votes for them, they're not going to be able to reach our number. That number right now is Edmundo González Urrutia, 6.4 million votes, and Nicolás Maduro, 2.8 million votes. So part of what we are doing today in the country is organizing town hall meetings to show to everyone the same thing we are showing to foreign ministries, because also this is not naive optimism, this is informed optimism. And a way to keep momentum and a way to keep the people mobilized is also showing to everyone that we know what is happening, that we were prepared for this scenario, and that what we are pushing, what we are trying to do is the truth to prevail. So we believe in peace. After 20 years of confrontation, we don't have an armed group on our side. We have always rejected violence. And also we understand that the regime is the first one interested in taking this into the brute force kind of measuring. That is not our playground. We are in the majority business, not in the violence business.
Given that, how you say you don't have guerrillas, you don't have you're not going the violent route, but there are elements of the regime that are willing to use violence. How worried are you for the people that are marching on the street? How worried are you for your own leadership, for Maria Corina? What are the real risks there, and what can be done to mitigate those risks?
Well, while we are talking, and that I'm sorry that from time to time I look to our side while we are talking, we just received the report, and Freddy Superlano, that is one of the members of the national leadership of Juan Guaidó and Leopoldo López party, has just been detained by security forces. Right now is a disappearance, because we don't know which security force and we don't know where he is. And it's the same with a member of the Causa R. It's a left-wing party that is part of the coalition, La Causa Radical. His youth leader has also been detained. And this has been part of a normal basis for us lately. We are worried. We are absolutely concerned about what the regime can do against our leadership. That's why we insist so much that the international community have to draw a red line on repression, and has to draw a red line about Edmundo González, Maria Corina Machado, and the political leadership integrity. Also, we are asking for solidarity to countries, ambassadors, and embassies. I know that is not the work of a diplomatic mission, but if someone jumps the wall and try to look for a safe place to be, what we are asking to ambassadors and to everyone, please don't kick anyone out. If everyone jumps a wall and try to look for protection, it's because it's the only option they have. I have been in that position. I wasn't arrested because someone protected me and someone used that diplomatic capacity to avoid me being arrested. And it's the same case for a lot of us. So this is a moment to use that solidarity. This is a moment to play hardball. And this is a moment also to help us inside. There's a UN personnel on the ground. There's still some of the people who went to see elections. We are asking to them to be around. We're asking to them to go to the campaigning office and to make sure that nothing is happening there. And also, even when this is, no one should be get used to this, meaning having people detained and having people disappear. In our case, it's not like we are used. You never get used to that. You still have the same feeling in your stomach every once someone texts that I need a place to hide, or in the moment, like as I had to do yesterday, call a friend and say, run, because they are going to your home and this is the moment to run and hide. But also, we are mentally, we are spiritually prepared for what we are facing. We don't have 2 weeks doing this. We don't have one day doing this. We have also learned. We have also tried to develop ways in how to face this. And there's something, maybe this is also too romantic sometimes, but we are convinced of what we are doing. We understand the responsibility we have. And if the leadership doesn't do what is asking to the people to do, no one is going to move around. So we understand that we can only lead by example. We can only lead by action. And this is what is happening in the country. But of course, we are concerned. Of course, we are scared. Of course, I am afraid for my family. I am afraid for the rest of my colleagues. And the ones inside are scared. But we have to choose what we fear the most. SEBIN, DGCIN, intelligence services, or having Maduro there forever. And that second option is way worse than being detained or being harassed by intelligence services. And that's why we are doing what we are doing.
No, thank you. A lot of people lose sight or ignore what kind of threat you're under. I think it's important, as you mentioned, to describe for people to understand really what this means and what this struggle really entails. Your struggle is one that has the high possibility of affecting you personally and your loved ones and friends. So you putting yourselves out there, Maria Corina putting herself out there, and others could have some serious consequences. We've seen that with Leopoldo and with folks all around the world that are involved in the struggle for democracy. Let me also bring in some folks that are asking questions that are watching. There's one question here that I just want to put out. It says by, here it is, Arturo Lopez Levy, political scientist and professor at Holy Names University. The question is, the Bolivarian Fifth Republic Constitution is prone to conflict and drastic pendular movements. Does the opposition propose any constitutional change, term limits, or bicameral legislature? I know that this is getting pretty far ahead of where you are right now, Miguel, but I do think that these are all good questions, and obviously we want to make sure that the folks that are watching are participants and get their questions in. So let me pose that to you, and I think then there's a question by Luigi Einaudi, former Secretary General or acting Secretary General of the OAS. But if you could answer that question, Miguel.
Yeah, briefly, we have always said that we are against indefinite re-election. That part of the distortions that our country have is that one person can be re-elected forever in any office, and that creates distortion in power. But at this moment, we are not opening the Pandora box of speaking about constitutional reforms or about referendums for the constitution or that kind of things, because we need to preserve something that is crucial at this point, that is a national consensus about political change. If you see right now Venezuelan social media, if you look for the institutional messaging of all the political movements and civil society in Venezuela, we have everyone from Maria Corina and El Mundo to the Venezuelan Communist Party asking for the CNE to recognize the results and for the CNE to release the electoral tallies. So we now have a consensus between people who believe and embraces the 99 Constitution and people who don't, people who was with Chavez in 98 and people who don't, people who was most structured and people who was since always part of the opposition. Everyone right now is together and preserving that national consensus and pushing forward. We believe is the most important part of today's movement and the effort we have to do. Of course, our country if we want development, if we want future, we will need to address the constitution, the law framework. There's a lot of things that doesn't work for a country that needs to reignite the economy and to rebuild institutional coexistence for good and forever. But we have to go in this step by step. Part of what the opposition has made as a mistake in the past is that instead of trying to go slice by slice, we try to eat the whole cake at the first moment, and it's impossible. There's an old school politician that says that if you want to eat an elephant, you have to do it piece by piece. And well, we are trying to make sure that is the approach we have right now, but having absolutely conscious and having in mind that that kind of things needs to be addressed and changed if we want to have more stability in the future.
Yep. Let me bring in Luigi. I'm going to ask Scott, who's our producer here, if he can open the line to Luigi, and Luigi ask his question. Mr. Naudi, can you hear me? Your hand is up. I think if you
there,
It's muted.
There you are.
thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. An impressive program, and congratulations. I'm amazed, and I also am reminded of Nicaragua in the election against the Sandinistas. The current Venezuelan difficulty is much greater than that facing Nicaragua then, because there was an existent inter-American system then, and there was a very intelligent Brazilian Secretary General who refused to allow Americans to participate in the electoral observation that the OAS mounted, because he knew that the international face of the situation was polarized. And it is true that we now have a polarized international situation with regard to Venezuela. And it's not just a question of the allies of the regime, who fortunately are few and mostly quite distant, but it's also the problem of the United States and the history between Venezuela and the United States, going back all the way to really the start of the regime. So my question is, what is the respective role that you see for the United States and for countries like the powers of South America and Mexico? What does Brazil, Colombia, what is their role in this current situation? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I will start with the region and then go to the States. First, what we have seen right now and has been helpful, and it's completely destroying the narrative of the regime that this is an imperialism operation or something from the old school imperialism to try to overthrow a revolutionary government, is that one of the biggest diplomatic efforts has been led by Brazil and Colombia. Also, what we have seen between Chile, Argentina is the biggest proof that this is not an ideological issue. The biggest progressive government in the region and the biggest liberal government in the region are in the same page about Venezuela and have a consensus about how to deal with Venezuela. And I believe that it's important to emphasize that, because sometimes here in the US and in other places, you try to see an oversimplification of this discussion, and you see some people on the think tank community or in the universities conversation try to frame this as the right wing, the international right movements against the left movements and all the poor revolutionary guys that are never able to do the revolution. That is not the situation in Venezuela, and all the engagement from the international community has helped. Also, what we have said to governments and what we have said to everyone from the US to the neighborhood and to Europe is that we understand that there's concerns and interests beyond the Venezuela democracy. We are not amateurs in that or rookies in that. We understand that countries have interests and have also concerns and not only principles and values. But if you want to address the migration crisis, for example, and if you are worried about the millions of Venezuelans going out and going to other countries and arriving here to the southern border, this is a really good opportunity to address the root cause of that and to solve the migration issue for good, and not only solving it by stopping people to keep going out, also by helping Venezuelans to go back. The first call I received on Sunday, the first early morning call I received on Sunday was my mom and my grandma. 91 years old, my grandma, more than 70, my mom. And that call was in the door of a voting center. And the first phrase they said to me is, I'm voting for you to be able to come back home.
Mm.
I'm voting for you to be able to be with us here together. And the same call I received, millions of Venezuelans received it during the election, because that is the main driver for us. It's not only about democracy, institutions, it's not only about economic development, it's as basic and as primitive as being with our families, as being in the place we belong, as being together without being kicked out of the country. And this is a good opportunity for that reunification. And second, if anyone has an interest of the Venezuelan resources, if anyone thinks that Venezuela can be back to being the good shape that we were in the past, meaning the biggest oil production in the region, the most stable currency, the most stable banking system, the most stable development system, and helping other countries to develop, this is a good opportunity to have Venezuela right on track. I believe a lot of people gambled and tried to have the tropical China, to have a country without political liberties, but open to be the mecca of capitalism, and try to have a monopolies of these kind of businesses. And I think that proved wrong. At the end, there's no way that you can have a real economical development and to have a normal, stable country under a dictatorship like the Maduro's regime. Not only because they are a dictatorship, also because they are extremely corrupt. Only the last corruption scandal that they had inside of the regime was $21 billion. It's not that I'm talking about English, it's billion with a B, not with an M. It's not a loss in translation issue. It's $21,000 million that they stole. So there's no way you can have a future or development under a regime. So the region approach is important, and also the biggest countries are really important in this. And last, about the US, we're pretty thankful for all the engagement that the US has done in the last administration and in this administration. We believe that coming into an election in the US is really important to keep this as a bipartisan consensus. We need everyone on board, and we need everyone pushing in the same direction. We need everyone to follow the example of the Venezuelan opposition. This is a moment for unity. This is a moment for to be coherent. This is a moment of principle, values, and doing what is right. And what we are expecting from the US, from the UK, from Canada, from the European Union is to help, to lead, and to set the example of what we're expecting out of the rest of the international community.
Well, from us at Global Americans, I'd like to thank you for taking the time. I know this is a busy, complicated time, and you took it to talk with us and our friends, our listeners, our viewers about something very personal, very consequential. I mean, the fight for democracy, and you're on the front lines, is something that we all share a passion for and a support for. I think we wish you the best in what you're doing, Maria Corina, Mundo. All of these folks, I think, are on the front lines and pushing forward. Please use us as a resource. We'd love to have you again. We've had you on the podcast. We have you here, and we will be following events in Venezuela very closely. Again, we serve sort of as a nonpartisan clearhouse to get information out on the different things that are happening in the region. We follow Venezuela very closely, and we wish you success and safety, my friend.
Thank you,
Robert,
Carl.
I don't know if you'd like to say anything else as we go out here.
Well, I mean, I repeat, I sign on to what Carl said, and also, I think one of the things we didn't touch on was how important this is for the region. You're seeing political tensions. You're seeing different groups kind of either supporting one side or the other side. And as you said, it's not a left-right issue, really. It's a democracy authoritarian issue. So it's very interesting to see who signs on to one side and who signs on to another. And I think this is going to end up being, whatever ends up happening in Venezuela, is going to end up being a very, very key moment in Latin American history, because it'll define where different actors fall going forward. But anyways, that's kind of my political scientist hat. From my the personal hat, I just wish you well and safety and success, and I look forward to you swearing into some sort of new government very, very soon.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Carl. And as our indigenous population says, one day it rains. You just have to keep dancing, and that's what we're doing. We're making sure that one day it rains. So thank you.
We hope we can dance with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.